Hello everybody, my name is Ian. I'm a humongous fan of ZACK's. I am a humongous fan of you guys, the fans, for helping us be here at this moment to celebrate this movie being released, to celebrate this movie and its history, its past, its present, everything. Thank you for making this con happen again. When we think about movies and we think about products in general, games, magazines, everything, when we lean towards movies, I think there's kind of a unsung hero that doesn't get enough credit. We like to talk about aspect ratio. We like to talk about the way it looks in terms of color, in terms of lighting, in terms of how the story was told. But I feel like there's something that pretty much paints the picture of what you're getting into before you even realize it. It's like a cognitive response, and that is typography. And the typography that's used. It's very important if you're getting into films, fan films, graphic design, other things, just as a base layer. We're not going to go college with this. But I just really wanted to discuss how the titles are used, specifically how sometimes they've changed with marketing, and just kind of go through making the newest logo with the tools that we have and just show how easy it is. So when you make your own stuff for your own future endeavors, just to get the creative juices flowing. But we have to start off with something very important. Lesson number 1. So, typography, right? What can we use with recognition? Why would you want to use it? What is the purpose? If you're cosplaying, short films, anything like that, brand recognition is very much key. Typography and very much the words that are used and displayed, kind of a gateway to what we're getting into. So, Lego Movie, obviously when you look at that logo, you know what you're getting into. Atomic Blonde versus Chocolat, very different female-driven movies, right? They kind of paint what ride you're getting into. So to understand it as a very baseline before we get into it, typography, by definition, is the style and appearance of printed matter. So we're in the digital age. This is very much less a lesson about drawing or creating your own fonts with Illustrator, but very much finding things to relate with what you're working on. So example, Liz Wonder, right? Very prominent, awesome fan in this community. I think people know her very well. I think God said one day he had the mold for Gal and sent her down and went, "Did I send this down yet?" And then accidentally did it again, right? The logos that she uses specifically for her brand recognition and when she does cosplay and other things is very much a Wonder Woman logo, and that, without saying, is what is trying to be presented, right? So when we're looking at ZACK's movies, when you look at like Watchmen is the logo from the book. If you saw a different one that looked like Man of Steel's, for example, it would say a different tone for what this movie is. So that's kind of where we're going to go with the anatomy of this recognition, is how do you want to use it to promote yourself, but how did they kind of use it as a bare bones aspect, right? So as DC fans, I thought it would be kind of fun to show some examples of when you know something is a little bit different as it progresses and evolves. What I mean by that is when you see a logo for Suicide Squad. So let's jump back to the beginning, right? Usually when they do these logos and they have cons or events, you'll see a logo before the movie is made. Sometimes it stays the same, sometimes it doesn't. Suicide Squad, when they first showed the logo, I don't know if anyone remembers this as much, but it had like a comic logo. It looked kind of cool. As it went on, then we saw the teaser. I believe it was 2015 maybe. It was the Sizzle Comic-Con reel. Awesome. David Ayer flies the whole cast out. they talk about like how they went for this day they can't miss, Comic-Con. They play the trailer, very dark in tone, follows BVS almost perfectly. The logo at the end, like made of a rock, highlighted in red, dark, right? Very dark and cool. As it progressed, as we got closer to the people were indifferent about BVS, the trailer started to change. We got a little bit of neon behind it. Sort of a middle ground of what was to come, right? Then by the end, the one you associate with hearing Queen or Heathens or whatever it is this explosion of neon colors and way different than the first original two, especially the one that we know from the sizzle. I'm not going to get into studio stuff at the moment, but you can tell that a product is different as that goes on. Sometimes we're lucky and somebody else, particularly the person creating the movie, chooses to do that, and then sometimes they don't. And that's just it, right? Same with Justice League. So Justice League, for example, when it started out, had a very comic booky look. Actually, one second. So, if I remember correctly, when they first showed the logo during their sizzle, right? Very cool. Just baseline white, we can actually recreate it pretty easily if we have a font. I think someone made one called Justice, which people use all the time for trailers, edits, stuff like that. But it looks like this. This is more later on, I believe. It has that stone look that follows Man of Steel's logo more so. Definitely not what we just saw in the most recent movie. This is sort of second phase. This is probably the middle ground of what Zack's movie, if it came out that time, would have used more so than the white. But let's compare. Let's have this side by side. So I'll bring it up over here, and then we'll have the new one, right? The new logo that we saw in the most recent teasers next to it. If it doesn't tell you right off the bat, this is not the same movie, this is not necessarily a director's cut, this is very much a different product, which purposely so paints the picture. If you didn't get it already, now you know. Which is interesting too. I kind of wish they used it on some of these posters that they had in Times Square when they marketed the movie. Besides teasers, it seemed like it had sort of the old logo, and I think that tricks people sometimes where they're like, what's the difference? But you can see there's a difference. Watching the movie is one thing, but seeing it marketed a completely different way. Why would you change the original logo if it's just an extended cut, right? And again, not getting into studio stuff, not getting into everything that went down, just a baseline marketing thing. Right, different product. Suicide Squad with this different being altogether, and that's kind of the power of typography, of doing stuff like this. When you are using graphics and logos, this paints the picture that you are watching a different product, right? So how does that help you? Well, first, let's dive in. I'm going to use Final Cut. You can use anything. This isn't a lesson of how to use Final Cut. If you want to use something else, by all means. Making a logo, at least for me, when I used to do short films, projects, whatever it was, would kind of get me into the groove of what I wanted the tone to be while I edited. So what we're going to do is just recreate the Justice League logo as best we can with the fonts that we have, and then we're going to kind of mess around with it and change it to something else and use that towards recognition. We've made it. We're here. Probably the most important part of this. We're going to recreate the logo. So what I've done in Final Cut, if you're using Premiere, if you're using Avid, if you're using After Effects, whatever has a generator or whatever you want to do to type, this isn't necessarily a follow along. This is just to get the creative blood pumping, and then you can recreate and mess around. And honestly, the best thing to do in this sort of aspect is just do. Hands-on stuff with this is probably what taught me the most, is looking at a logo, looking at a font, replicating it, seeing what I wanted to do, Again, when I used to make short films, one of my favorite things was to make a title first as I was writing, or, you know, what did I want to make? What would a good title be? And then writing it out and then adding everything later. So this is what I made for JusticeCon, right? We'll play that. You have the fade, word reveal, Zack Snyder, JusticeCon, very similar fonts, not exact. Didn't have Gotham. We have the logo in the back. Instead of JL, we have JC. How did I make this? What was the purpose of it? Basically to show that if you see this and you know it's for JusticeCon, besides the Zack Snyder with the logo and everything in placement, this is basically how you're going to recognize it's the same as this. So between the two, and again, mine is a little bit darker, a little bit different in texture. This very much brighter compared to what it looked like in the trailers that had a bit of a gray. This is just the screenshot that I found. We're pretty much replicating it so people recognize that they're associated, right? So let's try to replicate sort of the process behind this. Right over here, we are going to bring down, for now, 2 custom 3D titles. Have them right underneath each other. We are going to make sure that they don't have any sort of weird fade ins, fade outs, anything on them, which they will if you do. Go up to your animate and just turn all of that off. Just leave it. No movement. So, over here, we're going to type on the first one, Zack Snyder's. And again, it's overlaid. We're going to move it in just a second. At the bottom, we're going to type Justice League. Okay. And we will move this one down. As you can already see, the power of different fonts is that does not look anything like the movie logo. If you showed me that, I would very much know it's not the same movie. If they tried to do that in 2017, I would kind of know immediately that this is not his. So, not sure if this is the correct font. The one I found that was the most similar is called Gaz. As you can see, if you compare this, again, to over here, pretty similar, right? But close together. We're going to use tracking to spread that apart. Now we're getting closer. It already has a built-in texture. This is going to be more prominent when you use 3D. You can use a base title. 3D is sort of where our meat and potatoes is for the movement that we have. We're going to go up to Justice League, or Zack Snyder's, and bring that size down a bit. Change this to Gil Sands. Now he uses Gotham. Gotham is pretty pricey. If you are in that range to buy that, by all means. I am not. Gil Sands is going to be different. A lot of fonts will have different ends to their Z's, A's, and C's. They may have a different apostrophe or symbol. If you can find something that's close, that's the beauty of it. There are hundreds of these things. Whatever is close for you, use that. So, let's move this up above. Actually, we'll center it for now, just so it's easier to focus on. Again, bring the size down a bit. Tracking, we're going to spread it out, right? So we're already kind of close in terms of what we can recognize. If you bring up the photo, it's not that bad. So, again, Gotham has a different sort of weight to it. Nice thing about 3D is that we can add a weight ourselves. So, this is looking a little thin here. Can thicken that to there. I would say 1.4 or whatever it is on your application you're using, but just thicken it enough. You can compare the two. Usually I like to have the photo kind of next to it as best as I can as I'm clicking back and forth. I always bring it up in Google if you have enough RAM. To have multiple things up, really study this. This is your Bible here of how you're going to do fonts, is the photo that you're replicating if you're doing that, or whatever you're using to kind of get the same look. So again, we're going to move this up, size it down a bit more to about there. We'll move Justice League up or so. Bring that down. Okay. All right, cool. So that's looking a lot cooler than I anticipated. Didn't think it would work that quickly. I'm just gonna spread this out a bit more. I think that looks pretty cool. Maybe thicken it up a bit as well. And this is sort of the fun, is that this is probably what you'll waste the most time on, is just seeing how direct you can get it, right? So ZACK has a texture on this. We don't really need to add it, but typically in the trailers it looks a bit more gray. I kind of mess around with it. You can use, if you believe that he used stonework, and again, we're down to material, this is in 3D, so the best thing to do when you're making stuff is you can click, actually do it on Justice League, you can change your materials. This is going to be sort of a fun thing later if you're really into like the Man of Steel logo and it has that sort of metally look because of steel. This is sort of the way to do it instead of the baseline basic 2D. So say we want to use like a concrete, you can get that cool look. That's looking pretty dope. That's looking stone quarry-ish. If you want to use a metal, I typically use, what I used for this was a metal. I feel like it has a little bit of a shine, reminds me of Man of Steel, but it also has the push that I was looking for. And then I went down to my effects over here and I put a black and white into cool tones, dropped it on top. That graded out so it wasn't super bright metal. Makes it a lot easier. We'll use a stone for this though. Let's see what we got here. That's pretty, I mean, that's pretty Justice League-ish. It's very stone looking, I would say. This is very much brighter, but let's do like a gray look to it. Let's support the old stone quarry. That's pretty cool. Now, in the center, if we throw this, I believe underneath, let's see, yes. So, obviously, and shout out to Butterbar for making probably one of the coolest shirts on Ink to the People that I bought as a sweater as well. That design is incredible. The Detroit shirt was incredible. Love it. Cannot express the coolness that you guys in the fandom have like created. What I'm going to do here though is I'm going to do a crop. Always, if you do something like this, give credit to your Butterbars out in the world. Please support the artist. But we're going to crop. I'm going to click the crop here. Bring this guy up as best as I can. Get rid of what we don't need here. I'm going to transform, bring this down. And I'm going to look at my photo again real quick. So it seems like the way, and again, we're just kind of doing it in a quick sense here. I'm going to bring the opacity down so we can kind of focus more on the words in front here. Maybe what I want to do is brighten up Zack Snyder's Justice League. Typically that little boost in the center isn't there, you know, if we look at the other photo, but this is actually pretty close. It's not too bad. And it gets the, we have the C here, of course, for the con, but you know what I mean? It's fun to do this. If I just had this, actually let me make it a bit more presentable here. Let me throw on filter. We'll dumb it down a bit. It's already black and white. Let's see. Cool tones. That's too dark. Who doesn't love contrast? Okay. Again, I'm gonna... Ooh, okay. Whoa. That's cool. Bring the brightness down a bit. Okay. Again, we're gonna go back here. Okay, so my camera died. I died a couple times, so this is future Ian. All right, we're gonna be jumping around a little bit. But again, so we finished the logo. It's not super hard. We just really did 2 title cards. We did a layer behind, again, thanks to Butterbar JC. So the cool thing is I added Justice Con versus Justice League, and it took like a second. I mean, right here is kind of what we had before. You get the gist of what the logo is supposed to look like. And then right back here again, Justice Con. So you can add motion, you can make it your own. That's sort of the best part of this creation process. So say, kind of highlight everything. We make it into a compound clip, right? We'll call it like Justice Con Complete One. Now it's its own being, its own entity. And what you can do with that to add a little spice, a little pizzazz, is if you want to bring it to the very beginning, right? I'm gonna get meta for a second because I'm editing as we go along. It's kind of trippy for me as well. But Justice Con right here, if you go over to, if you're in Final Cut again, you can go over, add a keyframe to transform for your position. You can hit this little guy right here. And actually I'm gonna hit it on scale just in case. See what I want to do here. I'm just going to kind of scroll along. Now as we're scrolling, nothing's happening. That's, of course, how it's supposed to be. This is the slow way of me doing it. So, we're just going to bring our scale up here. Just a little bit. Like so. And it should be keyframed, so if I go backwards... Yes, okay. So again, the trailer, and I'll try to make this a little cooler. I just use a generator. I throw a custom down just so we have sort of a blank slate. I'll bring this down. Over in dissolves, you can throw across dissolve anything that you think would look cool. If it adds. Okay, so right here, there we go. We get a little bit of the fade in. So this is going to add a little bit more oomph. If you're making a trailer, especially movements, 3D text, everything like that, you start to recognize it is bigger, it is professional, this is blown up. The movie is an epic, so having that sort of feel with it adds to it, right? So if you play it, you have sort of the blank slate, hit play, a little bit faster than I wanted it to. And kind of crops out there, but again, you start to recognize it's a little similar, a little bit faster, a little bit more zoomed in, but it has that feel of the trailer, right? And again, you can do this with just about anything that you make. That's the fun of it. So when you're making your own projects, specifically anything film related, if you're using a Final Cut, Premiere, these are just like the sprinkles on top of the whipped cream to kind of add the push of what looks more professional. But it just has that familiarity when you see like a big trailer in a movie theater and it has motion and 3D and all these things. This adds to it. It's very easy. It's very snap of the fingers for some of these things that you may do. And again, familiarity, recognition, this is the cream of the crop of what we're talking about. Just base by base, how that clicks, right? let's do something a little fun. I recreated a couple logos from the DC universe. Man of Steel, for one. Again, Gil Sans. We have sort of the steel look. We have a little bit of the light, so we have the illumination that the title kind of bared. We have the spacing pretty close. We have Batman v Superman, right? So we have the line kind of in the center that divides. Again, this is a different font. We didn't have Gotham, so the J is going to be different, but the illumination, how it is, it's flatter as a logo. There's not really rock or text or anything that has a feel compared to the others. I think before I made this little ZACK SNYDER'S Justice League, just a condensed version, wrote it out, threw it up, that has sort of a gloss to it. I went and made, I believe, let's see. So one of the original Wonder Woman fonts, I think they kind of changed. They might have used a Futuro, but Railway is a really cool one that they used on, I think it was a poster that is always stuck in my head. So the way the W is super cool. It still has that serious look like the other movies. And then of course we have Wonder Woman. So I made this two different ways. The gold was the way it was teased originally before the movie got delayed. Had this really cool glow look to it. And again, if you're making something like this, I used gold for the material, but then I added a glow. I made it yellow. I thinned it out so it wasn't super light, and it just kind of adds a little bit of an appeal, a touch to it, so it's not super flat, but it also kind of replicates. The only thing we're really missing is that DC logo that they always put here, but pretty much to a T. If I pulled up the other logo, it's pretty close. The only thing that's different is the 1 and the 8. If you didn't notice that, that means I did an okay job. The 8s are very tricky with certain fonts. Sometimes they wrap, sometimes they're like two circles, like a snowman. I used the one that I thought was closest. I think the original used like an ITC, avant-garde Gothic, or of the sort. I think for this one specifically, we used this guy right here as a plane, thinned it out. This, of course, has the look because... So for front edge, if you had square, it would fill it in. Looks cool. Probably had some promotion stuff that looked like this sort of opacity, this gold look. I wouldn't be surprised. But again, trying to remake the old one, I just used, I believe it was round ring. Gives it the gloss. And again, we had it filled in for here, had a little motion, moves like the TV stuff, bada bing. Now the cool thing is, and again, I love this fandom so much, so much. And I've been here just about since the beginning. I've met a lot of cool people, I've followed a lot of cool people. Gonna throw some names out here in terms of who, just by recreating what I associate them with, or what they kind of associate themselves with. So, of course, ACS Universe, Anthony, usually has the Superman logo on him, right? Man of Steel, if he talked about it on the podcast, you could just throw in ACS Universe, add a transform. You could push forward a little bit in a slow sense, kind of scale it up. There it is, right? Cool. And then you might associate it with that. Or, for example, here we have Batman v Superman. So, make this again here. So, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Well, why not have, so I'm not too off the camera, Wonder Meg and Nerd Queens. Scale it down to here. Do something fun. Dawn of Justice Con. Highlight that. Bring it down a bit. Cool. And let's see. Why not have Wonder Woman be our very own Liz Wonder? And again, the way that she uses with her cover photos and things, she uses fonts similar or very much like Wonder Woman like. You throw this on something, you have her in one of the cosplay outfits that's Gal's association, right? And of course, people love 84, like Dave or Dave. So again, it's all about how you want to be recognized within your brand. If you're doing, again, cosplay, short film, podcast, whatever you want to do, if you make a title, you want it to be scary, you want it to be happy, you want it to be sad, you want it to kind of emote or connect with the feeling that you're going for, and you've made it or you are making it, what I like to do is I actually just like to make a title. So Dream Lake Road, that's a cool one. So if we wanted it to be like horror, let's find a creepy font here. As I'm scrolling through, you can see a lot of these aren't going to work with what I want it to be. Let's see. Okay, so example. This font is very much, I don't want to say Silent Hill, but it has that vibe to it. If I took the 3D away and made it less goofy here. So if we squared it and then we took the depth away and if I wrote, Dream Lake Road. It has a creepy, like Silent Hill-ish, like Japanese horror game vibe to it. Or your Nintendo 64 crashes or doesn't load. It has that weird, creepy, like green on blue font. This kind of reminds me of that. So if you're making something a little creepy, you could change the color, you could change the texture. You know, say you want the grunge look. Maybe you want it to be a little deeper. You want it to be a metal. This is just all kind of within the realm of what you're creating. Toss that out the window. Since we're talking about fans and people that I have come to completely love to see, support, definitely not a part-timer, Sam. Oops. Who I think has done a lot of just support through Twitter, loves Jurassic Park. I would do something like this. I would not use graphite, but let's see here. You know, Sam Parker metal, throw a little cool look in there. Right? So the main lesson at the end of all this is, again, I would think, you know, it's common sense. We're surrounded by marketing. Everything is a commercial in our lives. Everything that we wear, everything that we do is surrounded by marketing. But again, I just think that sometimes typography with movies is slept on. And I think that Zack's movies give off a powerful sort of feel to them, whether it's the musical style notes of Sucker Punch, whether it's the comic likeness of 300 and Watchmen, or the seriousness that conveys from the Man of Steel logo and the Batman v Superman logo. The one thing I don't want people to forget, though, is that there isn't a specific way to do it. There are ways to make it look ways to look more professional, ways to look more like a professional has done it or is doing it. But at the end of the day, don't let anything cut your creativity. That's the thing that we need, especially now more than ever, is creative minds and outlets. So if you have an idea and you want to try it, don't think that you can't because it has to look this way or that way. Try to see if it fits the narrative you're trying to tell. And again, whether it's cosplay, whether it's a short film, whether it's a photo or poster, create. And also keep in mind, some of these fonts, luckily the things that we're using, licensed, mostly through Final Cut or part of the computer. Some of them are open source, some of them are free to use, commercial use. When you're using something, just make sure to credit whoever made the font if you didn't yourself. Make sure that you pay the right amount that you're supposed to. Don't illegally download stuff, especially when you start getting into the big leagues, or starting to make things that will have a further reach. So the reason I referenced Gotham earlier and why it was so expensive and why I use Gil Sans or something similar is just because it's a lot of money, right? But at the same time, we're lucky enough where there are a lot of fonts that are literally identical to the point where it feels illegal that people make, that you can use if they're free to use, but just go within your means. And then sometimes if you're restricted to use one thing, you'll feel creative using another. So that's really it. That's, we talked about sort of the fan logos and how that you can recognize the movies they're connected to. We created the logo. We created the Justice League logo again. We did the discussion on Suicide Squad and Justice League, and like I said, base layer. I know it's been a little lengthy, my camera's died a couple times, but I think that's it. I think this is the end. This is where I get serious, I guess. I just want to give a quick little outro, dedicate this to all the fans that helped make this movie a reality. It means a lot to me personally. I always wanted to be a director and create and make, and with what we saw before disheartened me. It took me away from the love that I wanted to put into this sort of field. So seeing this realized gives me a lot of hope and pushes me back into the direction of creativity that I need. But these fans the past couple years, whether it was Meg and the Nerd Queens or the conversations with just Twitter people in general, Film Junkies podcasts, watching Ohio Dave on Twitch, there's been a community, and it's bigger than them and it's bigger than us, and it's crazy and it's flourished these past couple of years, and the power that you guys have had to make this a reality is mind-blowing. But it's helped me. A lot of people have had this connection with this movie and with Zack's work and stuff, and it's been incredible. So I just want to thank you guys. This couldn't have existed without you, and the con and everything else, but the movie and the friendships we made along the way. Saying a lot of ums, but yeah, just thank you guys. Thank you so much for keeping strong the entire way and tweeting and really pushing the word out there and fighting against what felt like all odds to just see this vision, So just thank you. Thanks again. And I hope you guys learned something today, but that's all I got for you. So let's see what happens next.